Welcome, I'm Tracy Smith, and here comes the sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things that we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. Recently, I sat down with two of Hollywood's biggest stars to talk about the end of the world, at least as it was portrayed in their satirical new movie.
Do you know how many the world is ending meetings we've had over the last 2 years?
Drought, famine.
Hole in the ozone is so boring.
Why did you decide to do this movie?
Because of him, because of Adam.
I had been waiting patiently for something like this, and it sort of landed in my lap.
He's done award-winning movies like Big Short,
Yeah.
Vice, but are you Anchorman fans?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Ron
Yeah.
Burgundy's. My second husband.
Later in the show, more behind the scenes from my interview with Adam McKay that you can only see here on Here Comes the Sun.
It was definitely a kick to be back in Boston. I used to have a thick Boston accent. When I later moved to outside Philadelphia, and I remember all the kids making fun of me because I had that thick, pak ya ka by the, although that sounds more like Kennedy. Mine was more working class, pak ya ka by the Harvard Yard. I had that kind of accent, so it was really cool. And
Why do we all still love Lucy? Jim Axelrod has the story of Lucille Ball's 7 decades-long legacy.
That was like the first time I got to see a female being funny and silly and embarrassing, and it was cool.
Count this 30-something among the millions who 70 years after the premiere of I Love Lucy still love Lucy.
Coming up, a peek behind the curtain at a film full of Academy Awards all-stars. It takes a special kind of screenwriter and director to get audiences laughing at a story of impending planetary doom. That's exactly what Adam McKay did with his newest movie, Don't Look Up, along with a little help from some of Hollywood's A-plus list stars like Leonardo DiCaprio and Meryl Streep. I sat down with Leo, Meryl, and Adam. You don't get to say that every day.
So how certain is this?
There's 100% certainty of impact.
Please, don't say 100%.
Can we just call it a potentially significant event?
Yeah.
Yes.
The end of the world.
There's a comet headed directly towards Earth.
In the new movie, Don't Look Up, a giant comet is on a collision course with planet Earth.
This comet is what we call a planet killer.
That is correct.
And who better to tell the story of cosmic disaster than some really big stars?
99.78% to be exact.
There's Leonardo DiCaprio as the scientist trying to warn the world, and Meryl Streep as the president who won't take him seriously.
And then what happens, like a tidal wave? It will be far more catastrophic. There will be mile-high tsunamis fanning out all across the globe.
It's quite a vision, and the guy behind it all is screenwriter-director Adam McKay.
by the way, that's one of my favorite things that you put in.
He let us sit in as he and editor Hank Corwin cut the final version in their LA edit room. Did you, in casting this, just look at the 2 front rows of the Oscars and say, okay, yeah, these are the people I want in the movie?
I mean, I guess. So for instance, with the President Orlean, of course, you think Meryl Streep, and you just assume she's gonna say no and you'll move on.
Was there a moment where you kind of said, oh, come on, this can't be happening? You know, I want a Leonardo DiCaprio type, and you get Leonardo DiCaprio.
He was the moment. When he said yes, I was like, this is crazy.
And it gets even crazier.
We need you to attend an emergency cabinet meeting where you would be fully debriefed.
Well, what about us?
You do not have clearance for this, sweetheart.
Oscar winner Jennifer Lawrence is a snubbed scientist. Oscar nominee Jonah Hill is a petty White House official.
Your breathing is stressing me out. This will affect the entire planet. I know, but it's like so stressful.
It doesn't take long to see that the comet is a metaphor for climate change, with the world split between believers and skeptics. And while there's nothing funny about global annihilation, the movie is a comedy through and through.
What if we have to go to the bathroom?
We'll lay out some newspaper for you. Grab you a can of Febreze.
Did you feel like I have to do a comedy?
Yeah, because if we're laughing, we can deal with stuff. It's when we get, overwhelmed with depression or despair, that's when things get hard. So as soon as I realized we needed to laugh when it came to dealing with the climate crisis, I knew where to go.
And he's learned how to get a laugh or two. Adam McKay dropped out of Temple University to join the Second City improv troupe and eventually was hired as a writer at Saturday Night Live, where he met his comic soulmate, Will Ferrell.
The experience of writing with him and then getting the sketch on the air was so fun and pain-free. Neither one of us were overthinking things. We were just having a good time that was like, oh, I gotta work with this guy. And that was kind of the beginning of it.
That's gonna do it for all of us here at Channel 4 News. You stay classy, San Diego. I'm Ron Burgundy.
Damn it! Who typed a question mark on the teleprompter?
After SNL, McKay and Ferrell took their brand of funny to the big screen with films like Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby.
116. 116! I'm going fast again!
But even with runaway success at the box office, McKay wanted to stretch his legs beyond pure comedy. He got his chance in 2015 as director of the movie version of Michael Lewis's bestseller about the 07-08 financial crisis, The Big Short.
The whole housing market is propped up on these bad loans. They will fail.
I'm not sure that most people who read The Big Short thought, oh, this would make a really interesting feature film.
I couldn't put it down. And for some reason, when I was done with it, all these people have told me since, oh, I never thought that could be a movie. I was like, oh, this is a movie.
It was a movie, all right.
B's, 0. Double B's, 0. Triple B's, 0. And then that happens.
What is that?
That's America's housing market.
McKay turned a confusing story into a box office hit and shared an Oscar for screenwriting. For him, it was all personal.
My father lost his house in that collapse. I mean, people think, oh, big shot Hollywood guy, but no, this collapse affected people that were close to me. So it was definitely a project that I felt a real emotional connection to.
Do you know how many the world is ending meetings we've had over the last 2 years?
Drought, famine. Hole in the ozone is so boring.
And now, Adam McKay has an emotional connection to the climate crisis. It's a passion he shares with some of his best-known cast members.
Why did you decide to do this movie?
Because of him, because of Adam. I'm a huge fan. Nobody makes me laugh harder in his movies, and nobody makes me think more.
I had been waiting patiently for something like this, and it sort of landed in my lap. And then, of course, got to work with amazing people like this.
He's done award-winning movies like Big Short, Vice. But are you Anchorman fans?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Ron Burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
My second husband.
Turns out they all needed a few laughs on set. The movie was filmed at the height of the pandemic, masks and all. But to Leo DiCaprio, that only made the film more meaningful.
It was a fascinating thing. This is the 100-year pandemic, but to realize that everyone was going through the same thing simultaneously
at the same
on
time.
Earth.
Yeah, right.
And that's why it connected with this screenplay that was about the climate crisis, that we're all going to feel the ramifications of this. And what we're seeing right now with the wildfires and the massive hurricanes and all these catastrophes, it doesn't get better than this, okay? It doesn't get better than this. It slowly becomes worse.
It would damage the entire planet, not just a house.
The entire planet. Okay, well, as it's damaging, will it hit this one house in particular that's right on the coast of New Jersey? It's my ex-wife's house. I need it to be hit. Can we make that happen?
But bad news, like the climate crisis, is a tough sell, and the film skewers news media types, played here by Tyler Perry and Cate Blanchett, who insist on smiling through it all.
Are we not being clear? We're trying to tell you that the entire planet is about to be destroyed.
Okay.
Well, it's, just something we do around here. We just keep the bad news light.
Right, it helps the medicine go down.
From where you sit, is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked for it.
Here we are. We all get fluffed up and we come on and we're talking about our movie and we're on TV and, he shaved. And yes, we try to give the people something, something to lift them. And I think it's accurate about everybody's very human desire not to look at the bad thing.
I totally agree. I think, again, talking about climate, I've talked about it a lot, and you can kind of see people's eyes glaze over.
Can one movie make a difference?
Hopefully. But at this point, I'm Debbie Downer with this issue. So you're asking the wrong guy. To me, it's about a little less, conversation and a lot more action.
At this very moment, I say we sit tight and assess.
Sit tight and assess.
Sit tight and assess.
You want us to sit tight.
And then assess.
Adam McKay isn't the first filmmaker to use comedy as a way to get a serious message across. He's just hoping he won't be one of the last.
We could overcome this, but what's scaring me now is it's really getting to be down to the last second. So hopefully this movie is something where we get a lot of laughs, but we also get a kick in the pants. Did Christian Bale save my life? Did Dick Cheney save my life? I don't know, but I'm gonna give the credit to Christian Bale and my wife. How about that?
Adam and I talked about much more than his latest film. That's up next. Here comes more from my interview with Adam McKay, exclusively on Here Comes the Sun.
Vice. When we were just talking, when we saw you in the edit room, you said, Vice was so draining for you. I mean, it took it out of you, that movie, Vice.
Yeah, I literally had a heart attack. I mean, when the movie, a week after we wrapped filming, I went home and I had a, thank God, fairly mild heart attack. But as far as movies to choose, I definitely could have chosen a much easier movie. I knew that one was going to be really hard, and especially with how divided our country had become in this kind of red and blue way.
And going back to the heart attack, Christian Bale had done some research into heart attacks that actually ended up coming in handy for you.
Yeah, that is entirely correct. Bale researches everything. He looks into every aspect of a character, which is no surprise. He's a great actor. So the morning that I had the heart attack, I just worked out and I was feeling queasy in my stomach and my hands were tingly, which just as someone who's never experienced heart trauma, I always thought it would be the pain in the arm or the chest. And exactly at that moment, I remembered Bale asking me when we were filming Cheney's heart attacks, how do you want me to do this? I go, well, what do you mean? It's a pain in the arm. He goes, no, there's a lot of ways you can have a heart attack. One of them is you're queasy in your stomach and your hands tingle. And I jumped up off my couch, I ran upstairs, and I took 5 baby aspirins. And I called my wife because I was still doubting it. And God bless my wife, she immediately called 911. And because of that, I suffered no damage to my heart. So did Christian Bale save my life? Did Dick Cheney save my life? I don't know, but I'm gonna give the credit to Christian Bale and my wife. How about that?
His film Vice may have nearly ended him, but for his newest film, Don't Look Up, McKay went back to where it all began.
You shot a lot of the movie in Worcester, which is where you spent, up until 4th grade?
That's right.
And your mom was a single mom. How did she make ends meet?
So yeah, we were living in Worcester, Massachusetts, which was very bizarre that we were filming a bunch of scenes there. I hadn't been back there in decades. And I had a single mom who was a waitress. I had a younger sister. We were on food stamps. But the funny thing about it is I don't have ill memories of it. Like, my mom loved us like crazy. We had a great family around us. But then looking back on it, it was like, oh yeah, we had our house robbed, we had our cars stolen, we had a gang chased me down the street. So looking back on it, but I was lucky that I was in first, second, third grade, because when you're that age, you're so resilient. But yeah, it was definitely a kick to be back in Boston. I used to have a thick Boston accent. When I later moved to outside Philadelphia, and I remember all the kids making fun of me because I had that thick, pak ya ka by the, although that sounds more like Kennedy. Mine was more working class, pak ya ka by the Harvard Yard. I had that kind of accent. So it was really cool. And I felt immediately at home when I was there. I was like, oh yeah, this is where I'm from.
This is where you're from.
Yeah.
So did humor come in as a way to deal with some of those things that you had to go through, being chased down the street or people making fun of your accent? Did humor come in early there?
It's funny. I remember when my parents split up, it was like second, third grade. And right at that time, I started watching The Three Stooges. And for a lot of younger people don't even know who The Three Stooges are nowadays, but they were like punk rock comedy. And it was like I discovered comedy at that moment. I don't know if that was an emotional adaptation, having your parents split up, because my mom was really funny. Like, she's always been funny. And my dad is a huge comedy fan. He has a great laugh. So probably somewhere between the two of them, I started getting into comedy.
After the break.
So why don't you join the thousands of happy, peppy people and get a great big bottle of Midget.
Just the name, Lucy, says it all. More on Lucille Ball's enduring popularity coming up.
Lucy loves me.
More than just a groundbreaking comedian, Lucille Ball was also a savvy executive who greenlit some of the most popular television shows of her era. But of course, it was her biggest hit, I Love Lucy, that transcends generations. We asked Jim Axelrod to explore why we still love Lucy.
On a Hollywood lot, where one of America's biggest stars ever first filmed her groundbreaking show, a young artist named Yolanda Glass has been hard at work.
One of the workers who came by, who worked on the lot, he looked up and he was like, Lucy would be proud of this. I can't describe how encouraging that felt.
Yes, count this 30-something among the millions who 70 years after the premiere of I Love Lucy still love Lucy. Still love Lucille Ball stuffing her mouth to keep pace at Kramer's Candy.
So why don't you join the thousands of happy, peppy people and get a great big bottle of Midget.
Still love her getting drunk pitching a health tonic that's 23% alcohol. Still love her going mime for mime with Harpo Marx. Almost. And still find Lucy both relevant and influential.
There wouldn't be a myriad of the female and people of color who are comedians out right now without her foundation.
The 180 episodes over 6 seasons on CBS followed the madcap adventures of Lucy Ricardo and the trouble she whips up trying to break out of her mid-century middle-class life. Married to Cuban bandleader Ricky Ricardo, played by her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz.
Yes, I love Lucy, and Lucy loves me.
Nowhere is the hold the show still has on the public easier to see than in Jamestown, New York, where Lucille Ball was born 110 years ago, and where 2 museums celebrate I Love Lucy, featuring replicas of the show's iconic sets.
All I think about is the amount of extraordinarily well-done physical comedy that took place here.
This is so evocative.
Journey Gunderson is the executive director of both the Lucy Desi Museum and the National Comedy Center.
70 years later, why is Lucille Ball still relevant?
I think in some ways, Lucille Ball's legacy can be appreciated now through a 2021 lens, perhaps better than it ever has been able to be appreciated.
Start with I Love Lucy's enormous popularity.
Ricky, this is it.
This is it.
The episode in which Lucy gave birth on January 19, 1953, reached 44 million viewers.
That I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States.
That's 15 million more than the next day when Dwight Eisenhower was sworn in as our 34th president. Lucy and Desi marked new territory for television, still evolving as a cultural institution. She was the all-American girl. He was a Cuban-born transplant. For its time, controversial casting that Lucille Ball insisted on.
She risked everything.
Remember, this was more than a decade before the height of the civil rights movement.
I think America raised its eyebrows, but then they quickly started laughing.
Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz were TV pioneers in an impressive list of other ways as well. The laughter was so loud when they filmed, it was recorded and used for other shows, helping to launch canned laughter as a standard production technique. That show where she gave birth capped TV's first ever pregnancy plotline on a Big 3 network sitcom.
It was still taboo for a woman who was pregnant to be out in the open in front of everyone.
And when Lucy needed some time off post-delivery, Desi offered up a first that changed the Hollywood business model forever. Just repeat some episodes that had already aired.
Desi Arnaz, father of reruns?
Yes, and the story goes that CBS executives laughed at him and said, who's going to want to watch them after they aired?
It turned out everyone would, which is why 70 years later, Lucille and Desi are still cultural icons.
I care about what's funny.
The subject of that new Aaron Sorkin movie being the Ricardos with Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem.
No.
And a novel, The Queen of Tuesday by Darren Strauss.
She was famous to a degree that hadn't existed before her, really.
While intrigued by her immense public appeal.
When they'd cut to commercial, the water tables would drop in the big cities because the entire country was going to the bathroom at the same time.
Strauss found her private pain most compelling.
Look at this face, though.
Yeah.
That's not acting.
Yeah, that's great, right? She and Desi were perfect together, except for the fact that they weren't. She loved him, he loved her, and yet they couldn't live together.
On camera, Desi was an understanding, loving husband. Off camera, he was an alcoholic and a womanizer.
She knew she couldn't divorce him because that would let the country down. That's how powerful that bond was for us. It was like a civic bond.
In his novel, Strauss gives Lucy love in the form of an affair with his own grandfather.
And I wanted to give her a love story of her own. That's why I told the story in this way.
But that's fiction. The fact, Lucy and Desi did eventually divorce. Both remarried. But most poignantly,
if we asked her at the end of her life, who was the love of your life?
Desi Arnaz, absolutely.
At the root, they were connected by their souls. Yeah.
Kate Luckenbill agrees, and she should know.
We had a very special bond.
She's their granddaughter.
Your grandparents did remain in love till the end of their lives?
Uh-huh. Completely. Madly. Deeply.
Now the head of creative direction at Desilu, the studio founded by her grandparents. That's right. Years after I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball greenlit shows like Star Trek, The Untouchables, and The Twilight Zone. The keeper of the I Love Lucy flame.
There's a healing quality to that show. That's what I feel I'm here to do, is to remind people of the elixir that they brought the world.
Luckenbill is protective of the memory of her grandfather, who died in 1986 at the age of 69, and her grandmother, who died 3 years later from an aortic aneurysm at 77. But she also wants to look at them honestly.
Better we allow the illusion to move aside and let's deal with the reality.
Yeah. And why it's so important not to let people like that die in their 70s from a heart explosion and alcoholism. Because neither of them should have been gone. They died of sadness and trauma, both of them.
No Hollywood ending, perhaps, But what Lucy and Desi did give the world still has an extraordinary impact 70 years later.
That was like the first time I got to see a female being funny and silly and embarrassing, and it was cool.
Just ask this young artist.
I feel like when I was really little, there was this idea that you have to be polite and quiet as a woman. And when I watched her show, that was the first introduction of you don't have to be quiet. You could be funny, you could be loud, and it was okay.
And guess what? America's gonna love it.
Right, and they're gonna love it so much, we're gonna be on for decades. And people in my generation, the next generation, and the next generation are gonna know.
I'm Tracy Smith. Come join us again next time on Here Comes the Sun.